Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Hi there, and welcome or welcome back. It's so great to have you here. In this Fetch First Friday episode, Stacy Renfrey and I ask, what happens when our dogs become the next frontier for human quick fixes? Headlines are already calling it Pawzempic, appetite-suppressing jabs designed to slim down our pets. Pharma companies promise an easy answer to the so-called canine obesity epidemic. But here's the thing, our dogs don't feed themselves. In this episode, we're unpacking what's really going on beneath the hype, from the science of GLP-1 drugs to the emotional projections that we place on our dogs. We'll explore why medicating symptoms without addressing root causes can be so dangerous for their bodies, their microbiomes, and our relationship with them. We'll dive into what's driving pet obesity, how our own stress and culture shape our dog's health, and why a species-appropriate fresh food foundation is more powerful than any jab. This isn't about shame or blame. It's about reclaiming responsibility as guardians and rewriting the narrative of what health for both us and our dogs really looks like. So if you've ever wondered whether there's a deeper story behind the quick fixes, grab a cup of tea and settle in. This one might just change how you see your dog and yourself. Now, before we get into this episode, Stacy and I want to let you know that we are so excited that we'll be taking Fetch on the road to the 2025 Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, happening this November 14th through the 16th at the Birmingham NEC here in the UK. The Mind, Body, Spirit Festival is the health, well-being, and spirituality festival, and we are beyond thrilled to be there, sharing how to live healthily and holistically with our dogs. We're in great company too, with other practitioners and vendors ranging from oracle readings, crystals, yoga, foodstuffs, you name it. If it's related to health, well-being, and spirituality, it'll be there. There are talks, stands, workshops, and food. I'm very excited about that part. As exhibitors, we're able to offer listeners to the podcast a 25% discount on a one-day standard ticket. So if you'd like to attend, check out the link in the promo code in the show notes. All right, on that note, let's go. Hello, and welcome to another Fetch First Friday.
It's exciting, and now it's September.
It's September.
It's great.
I know.
It's great. And now we've got another new topic to discuss.
I love it. I love it. Yes, this month we are kind of briefly addressing a topic that has come up quite a lot in the news lately of the development of drugs and supplements that are similar to how Ozempic and Wegovy and different human drugs function on the human side of things for weight loss and obesity control, how that is now being applied to our dogs. And so because we've gotten some questions around these sorts of things, we thought it would be great to kind of do our little thoughts, introduce it briefly, what these drugs and what these supplements are looking to do in the body, raise some questions around what this means, and also share our thoughts on actually how we can approach the very huge topic and very important topic of obesity in dogs, because it is a real problem. So we're going to give you a little bit of a rundown through the Fetch lens.
Yeah, and it's such an important topic, and I think so many people are beginning to become more aware about it. But now these products are coming onto the market, or there's more talk about them within social media and stuff. It's kind of brought it even more to the forefront because you've got it happening in the human space now, and now it's coming into the dog space. But for us, it's like, what is that a reflection of, I suppose, isn't it? And what's happening in that space and why it's now knocking into the dog world.
Exactly. And so we thought we're not going to go into depth about the various drugs or anything like that. We'll give you a kind of a cursory overview of what these drugs are designed to do in the body and why they're functioning in the way that they do. And then we'll kind of look at some issues around that. And like I said, how we can kind of approach things through a Fetch lens. But to kind of set the scene, so to say, these growing trends of these types of drugs, what they are aiming to do is actually serve as an appetite suppressant. right? And one of the big things that we find kind of funny in this whole conversation, and we have dogs that love their food. We get that.
Mhm.
But one of the things that we joke about all the time is that our dogs do not have opposable thumbs and therefore are incapable of getting the food for themselves, which is why they might pester. So the sort of scenario in which we're talking about appetite suppressant for humans and dogs is so drastically different because they
Mhm.
cannot access their food. We are providing it for them, right?
Yeah, and what does that mean? Yeah, and I mean, we'll always say it, won't we, about that we can open the cupboard doors to go and get their goodies and their treats for them, and they can't. So it's down on us, right? So, and what is that? What does that mean for us? Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
I think we'll speak about it later, but in terms of love language and all of those other things, but it's just an interesting reflection, isn't it? And it's very, very different for the dogs versus the humans. So,
It
yeah.
is. It is. And from a kind of I guess more medical perspective too, when we look at like, so what what the drugs are doing is that they're mimicking a
Hmm.
hormone in the body and the GLP-1 hormone, and it's designed to slow digestion down as well. And we were just talking before we started recording, I'd come across a post by Dr. Mark Hyman yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah, I think it
Is
was
that,
yesterday.
yeah,
Yeah.
where he was talking about the kind of timeline of Ozempic coming into the human sphere and testing and all that, and now all the different side effects that are being discussed and the lawsuits that are being put out there and all that. And he did a little bit of a rundown of how it's functioning in the human body. And again, this isn't the humans, it's not going to be exactly the same with dogs. However, we don't know because there hasn't been long-term testing on dogs,
Yeah.
right? But this raises questions about the things that we're looking for. But he was saying like that many people who have used the drug have permanent stomach paralysis, sudden vision loss and blindness, life-threatening intestinal blockages. Like pretty serious stuff, right?
Yeah. And for me, it was the statistic about how much it slows down digestion, wasn't it? It was like from
Yeah.
4 minutes to up to 70 minutes.
Yeah.
Was that right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I couldn't believe that the stomach is meant to start the process, do the job, and send it on its way to kind of let the microbiome and the intestines, everything else do its job. But it's slowing it down to 70 minutes, which means you've got food sitting in your stomach
Yeah.
for that long. I mean, that can't be healthy, like long. That baffles me.
No, and we've talked before, and actually, the interview that I did with Katie Hadley, who's a registered dietitian, all on IBS and SIBO, because we see quite a lot of SIBO both in humans and in dogs, and that's small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So when we're actually slowing that digestion process down, there's more of a chance of fermentation happening, and then essentially getting lodged higher. What we want the fermentation to happen in the lower regions of the intestine, in the colon, right?
Yeah.
You don't want it higher up in the intestinal tract. That's what causes bloating, that it causes a whole heap of problems. So one of the concerns that was raised when you and I were talking about this is like, actually, could we see more instances of SIBO then in dogs? As an example, we don't, again, nobody knows because it's not been tested for long enough. But yeah, so the human stomach, it normally takes 4 minutes, and this is making it 70 plus minutes, which is just sort of, it's just
That's
crazy.
mad. And when you think it is a muscle, it's meant to do that. It's meant to do the churning, that washing machine action to get the acids in with the food and start breaking everything down. That if that's not happening, that's kind of scary, you know? Are you
Exactly.
okay? Is Lucky okay?
I think he hears something.
Oh,
It's okay.
he's
Hold on
curious.
1 second. Let me, I'll go check. Yeah. Anyways, what were we saying before we were so rudely interrupted by a little Mexican
We'd said
tape?
about stomach and 70 minutes and that was terrifying. And yeah, we want the stomach to do its job with the washing machine and getting everything down
Yeah.
into the, yeah,
Gut, mo
that bit.
gut motility. Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found interesting in Dr. Hyman's post was he said, your body has natural GLP-1 production systems. Here's how to optimize them safely.
This was such a good list, wasn't it? We were just nodding along going, mm-hmm,
So good.
mm-hmm.
Boost natural GLP-1. Eat more fiber-rich foods. Include healthy fats. Try intermittent fasting. Regular exercise increases GLP-1 naturally. So it's not just about exercise to kind of quote unquote burn the fat, but actually this is part of getting all of the systems going.
Hmm.
Support gut health through fermented foods for microbiome balance.
And I
Bone
think
broth.
our favorite, yes, our
Yeah,
favorite.
exactly. Bone broth for gut lining repair. Avoid processed foods that damage gut motility. So that's the other thing too, is looking at the role that processed foods, ultra processed foods like kibble, for example, have on gut motility, which then raises the question. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I can't help but go there right now. One of the things that is being proposed to come out next year is a natural supplement that mimics GLP-1, and it is being put out there by a company that makes an ultra processed food. So to me, this smacks of the whole issues around big pharma, right? Of, oh, we're gonna create the health problem to then be able to
And then
create
we've got
the
the solution.
solution, right? And
Mm.
and this isn't like conspiracy theory. This is known. This is
Hmm.
this is what happens.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like, huh, this is an invitation for us to take a step back, look at obesity through a slightly different lens, and look at how do we, again, like we're saying all the time, get to the root of the problem. And instead of slapping on either a drug or a natural supplement specifically designed to deal with the whole GLP-1 issue, I mean, all of that, right? So that's kind of what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, and just going back to because I'm still on the stomach, the length of time the food's in the stomach thing, but as well, when you think about what kibble does within the stomach, the way that it swells up, that if you've then got potentially got food sitting swollen that much for longer in the stomach, that's more towards your point about SIBO and all those fermentation things happening, that it's not a healthy thing for it to be in the stomach for that long at that and stretching the stomach, which then makes wanting more food as well. So it's kind of a knock-on effect, and we're not thinking about the kibble impact on the bodily processes before we start adding in all of these magic supplements that are apparently going to help by just putting that on top of the kibble. So
Exactly.
it's kind of a yeah, one step forward, two step back, right? It's
Yeah,
just yeah.
exactly. And then, that also raises questions about bloat and dogs that are predisposed to bloat, you know?
Hmm.
So we have to bring all of this into context and into question.
Hmm.
Yes. Anyways, so that's a bit of an overview of like the way that these drugs are designed is to reduce appetite stimulation. But you had also done a little bit of research, a little digging into the whole Labrador issue as well, because I think what the breeds that really sparked looking at bringing these drugs into the canine world were like Labradors,
Hmm.
retrievers, sort of generally, right? Because they do have a tendency. I mean, we have the ongoing joke even about Ted being, a Labrador trapped in a Cocker body, right? Like Labradors are known, and anyone with a lab will talk about, like, they will literally eat anything. So it was those dogs that were specifically sparking a little bit of interest in studying what's actually going on with them and would they be candidates for a drug or a natural supplement or something that would help suppress appetite. And I wondered if you wanted to kind of, at this point, bring that up of some of the stuff that you were finding.
Yeah, it's just because there was a couple of studies and there was a couple of articles that we'd seen, and I just wanted to understand a little bit more. And it's to do with the gene mutation, and it's a long, complicated one, but essentially what it was showing was that this gene mutation has happened, and it's similar to the same one that's in humans. So of course that's why they were using them in contrast. But what I found really interesting whilst digging through was because I was like, well, how did this gene mutation happen? And obviously, it happens through diet, environment, all of these other factors. Another huge component, particularly for dogs, is this selective breeding. And of course, we are choosing dogs when breeding because of their trainability and their appetite, because if they've got a good appetite, if we're using treat training, and what does that then do? So we've got this knock-on effect that we are selectively breeding dogs with this gene mutation, and we're kind of creating the it going on further, and what those changes will continually mean by the fact that we keep selective breeding these guys, and Labradors were bred to have a good appetite. I think, isn't it that their stomach can go to like 3 kilos worth of food or something
Yeah, it's
because
something
for the
ridiculous.
swimming and the water that they're swimming to give them the energy that they need. So, but we've bred that into them. That was a human desire to put into those dogs. So we have to think about the reflection for us on what impact that's now having as well. So it's not just as simple as what we're feeding them, it is, but what did we breed into them as well? So
Yeah,
yeah, I found that really, really interesting. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that part of that as
right.
well, and how that might impact other breeds as well. But
Yeah.
obviously, the Labrador thing is very, very common. And the other sad thing is that we've got so used to seeing it. When you see a fit, lean Labrador, they're like, oh, that's really skinny. And you're like, no, that's exactly how they should be. And you get people with the show and the working lines saying, oh, they're show, so they're meant to be a bit stockier. And there's different discussions around the size of them, but it really did make me think that selective breeding has played an incredible part in getting us to where we are with these dogs right now.
Yeah, exactly. And another huge component along with that selective breeding is that we're generally not putting them in the environments to have them do the job that they were bred to do. So that's another component. They're not out there swimming for hours at a day. They're not out there hunting, all that. So they're not even burning the calories and they're not even being stimulated in the way that they were designed to be stimulated. So we have to look at that other component as well when we're talking about obesity.
And potentially when you add in the hip dysplasia issues that's so well known within Labradors as well. So if you've got both those issues coming together, and I know they do testing for the hip things, but are they testing for this kind of gene mutation for the obesity thing? Is that something that should be being brought into the testing from the breeders? That's just another question. But if you've got hip dysplasia alongside this propensity for weight gain, you've got a disaster on your hand, essentially, unfortunately, because I just heard lucky, because they won't be able to exercise the way that they need to because they're in pain. So you end up in this kind of vicious cycle. So again, it's what is selective breeding doing and has done?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love too that you brought up the fact that we have now normalized obesity, that we think that that's what a dog should look like, that they should have a little bit of weight on them. But we know from studies that even like half a kilo can make a massive
Mhm.
difference on everything. Because some of the importance of obesity, it's not just being a little bit chunky, right? There's a knock-on effect, whether it be to joints. So to your point, like if you've got a breed that is predisposed to having various joint issues, that's going to have a massive impact. But it's inflammation running throughout the body that impacts every single system. That
Yeah.
also is correlated with things like cancer, right? Like with chronic diseases, inflammation can be considered like a chronic disease, right? So we have to bring all of these different components together when we're looking at how do we understand what is right for our dogs and how do we actually show a different type of love language. I know we were talking about, and we'll get into this too, about how we're projecting a lot of our human love languages. I am so sorry if you can hear Lucky whining for
He's just
treats in the
joining in.
background. He is. And ironically, he is whining for treats. And but look at me as the person with opposable thumbs not providing them. So because he's had enough.
You're done. Shop
Yeah.
shut.
But oh goodness. But it's begging us to look at loving them in a different way or showing our love in a different way, which is also why we were sort of referencing the Puppuccino culture. We get that it's fun for us to go to, a coffee shop or even a raw food shop that does them and get like the pup cups and all that. Like that's fun. And it's okay every once in a while. But we have to look at when we're doing that repeatedly, that's a problem. And they were not designed to eat that way. That's an us thing. That's a human thing that we are projecting onto them. And it's just one of so many human things that we are projecting onto them, right? So it's such an invitation to really question that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just while you were saying all of that in the previous bit, I was thinking about Ted and because obviously you get when you go to the vets and you get your dog weighed and they will say that they're within a range. So a cocker spaniel should be between like 12 and 15 kilos, for example. A male cocker spaniel should be between a certain weight limit, and then a female would be slightly less. Ted's always weighed more than that. He's because he's a very solid, thick set cocker spaniel, and he's always weighed more. But I'm not so worried about the numbers on the scale. I'm worried about his body shape. And I think that for me is where we've become really unstuck, because we've got stuck into, oh, sorry, we've come unstuck because we've got so fixated on the numbers on the weight chart, like almost the BMI chart, which is helpful. It's an indicator, but every dog, just like us, are both, we're all set slightly differently, so we're going to carry weight differently. And Ted, he's bizarre because he tends to put more weight on in the summer than he does in the winter. He's the opposite to almost every other dog I've known. So I have to be really mindful of him during the summer. And because now we've got joint issues going on as well, I'm being really mindful now, and I'm having to cut back on any little extras or making them smaller so that he still gets the excitement of going for a snuffle for his treats, but they're smaller portions, right? And I'm trying to manage that within the rest of his diet and kind of thinking about including that in his total amount. So he's still within that weight range, but his shape has come down. And the thing is, when he ends up looking like a woolly mammoth as well, it's really hard to see his shape. Even when you've washed him down, it's hard. So I do get it with the big fluffy ones. It can be quite hard to see the shape. But I think if we were more aware of shape over numbers on the scale, I think that would help massively, because it would help break down that vision of when people say they're a skinny dog, and I'm like, no, they're not skinny. That's how they're meant to be. We're meant to see a couple of ribs. There's meant to be a tummy tuck. We're meant to see that waist when we look down on them, but that's not seen as normal. And that's potentially where we need to start chipping away at kind of getting those visuals out there of dogs that actually look normal. And ironically, I saw yesterday on a weight loss new vet food, they had used the chunkiest lab as a specimen of health. And I was just, that didn't have, it was literally a table, like flat underneath, flat on the top, chunky, with a big neck. And I was, yeah, no, that's not the image we need to see. You want to see fit, healthy, like proper shapes. Sorry, that was my little rant.
I love that you shared that. Hold on, I'm going to have to bring him up onto my knee 1 second.
Go for it. He wants to join in.
Come on then. You want to come up?
No.
He does not want to come up. He just wants more treats.
Yeah, while we're talking about obesity, the irony is not lost on us. And if Ted was in here, he'd be doing exactly the same thing.
Oh my goodness. I mean, yeah. I have so much empathy for those of us who are kind of struggling with how you handle this. I mean, but also this is a learned behavior that he picked up when I was staying with you. So I'm not faulting you at all, but I am saying that he's learned it, right? And so he repeats this time and time again. He is not hungry. He's literally just had treats. He's just learned, oh, great.
Yeah, mum's on a call. Yeah. Now's the time, because that's, yeah. And so, and I hold my hands up to what I created with Ted, and I'm having to be strong now. I'm having to be much firmer. Yeah, because exactly. I've got a joint issue, right? I've got a joint issue. I need to make sure he stays in that really svelte shape, because I don't want extra pressure going on those joints.
Exactly.
Because it's a potential cruciate ligament, and I don't, whether it goes or not is regardless, but I want to minimize the potential for it going. So that means keeping the weight off.
Yeah. And just for listeners as well, when we're talking about, if you might not be familiar with it, what we're talking about in terms of shape is the body condition score. And it's a standardized score with some diagrams, and we'll include a link to it as well. It was put out by the World Small Animal Veterinary Association. It's a free download, a free guide for you to see. And it has you look at your dog from like a bird's eye view, like you're looking down at them to sort of look and see that they've got that hourglass shape. Look at them from the side to see the tuck, like Stacey was describing. And then also there's a great guide for feeling. So when you're running your hands over your dog's side, what you want to feel a thin layer of fat, but you don't want it to be so fat that you can't feel their ribs. You still want to be able to feel the ribs. So we'll include that in the show notes too, because that's a helpful way. Because again, like you were saying, two dogs can weigh exactly the same and be within the appropriate guides for that particular breed, but one will be carrying too much weight for its frame and the other one won't, right? So
Yeah,
this is where this is a useful way to kind of evaluate, like, is my dog within the weight range, and what does the shape look like? And always, we as fresh food feeders and proponents of that way of feeding are always looking at, it's not so much about the numbers. It's not about how many grams you're feeding them and say, but I'm feeding what I'm supposed to be feeding. Yeah, but that might be too much for your dog. And so look at reducing the portion size, and also look at how they're feeling, how they're looking, and use that as your primary guide over their body weight and the weight of food that you're feeding them,
absolutely.
their
Yeah,
starting points.
yeah.
Anyway, so we will include that link.
That was fun. Uh,
But some
what?
other things, we've got such a great list going through this. So one of the things I think would be helpful to talk about then is like, so if you have a dog that is obese, what is a great starting point for actually dealing with that, right? That might not involve some of those things. And I think actually Dr. Hyman's list of stuff is really relevant to what we're talking about with dogs. So the first thing that we would look at from a fetch perspective is obviously if you are feeding any kind of processed food, and that includes treats, look at minimizing that. Get over to as much of a fresh food diet as you can. We would be looking at that first, and I should say a species appropriate fresh food diet,
Yeah.
because we know that carbs contribute to weight gain in dogs.
Yeah, and even with treats, I think as well that if we've got so used to seeing the various different. I mean, there's what thousands on the market now, but so many of them contain extra carbs, extra things that you wouldn't necessarily, and the fillers that are all will add to weight. So if you're adding that on top of potentially kibble, and even a fresh food diet, if you're still using those types of treats, you're it's not necessarily going to be helpful when there are so many fresh food versions of just pure meat treats that would be more beneficial in those situations, and you can use as part of their food allowance if you wanted to whilst you're on that journey.
Right. And remembering too that treats should only ever be about 10% of the dog's overall food intake. So it's not a lot. It really isn't.
No.
And we get like that's hard when you're doing training or you want to do rewards or you want to keep your dog quiet during a Zoom call. But but that's where you look at things like freeze-dried or dehydrated meat treats are a really great option. So you can take out some of their kind of
Yeah,
portion from their daily. Oh my God. He is. This is like he's like a little Ted today.
he is. I've
Uh
locked mine away.
oh my goodness. He's anyway. He's
Uh,
like the obesity issue. Are we talking about food? Let me.
yeah, I'm in. I'm sold. Where do I sign?
He has literally brought every single sock of both his and mine and his toys, sat at my feet, begging for me to fill them with treats.
Oh
Anyway,
dear.
anyway.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that was on one of our notes was about portion control versus nutrient density as well, wasn't it? So you might be reducing the amount of kibble, but they're not getting the nutrients, so they're still going to be hungry. Whereas, and like Mark Hyman was saying, it's about healthy fats as well, because fats have become kind of scared. Everyone's become scared about around the word fats and how, but the healthy fats, our body really, really needs them, and so does theirs. So if we can incorporate them, and they'll feel fuller for longer when we're using food like that. So it's about nutrient density over kind of potentially. There is an element of portion control in terms of the amounts that you're feeding, but can that amount that you're feeding be really nutrient dense, like
Mhm,
real fresh food? That's going to
mhm.
have such an impact and be so different, right?
Exactly. Also in terms of fiber, that was something that
Mm,
Dr. Hyman mentioned as well, is increasing fiber. But the way that we want to do that for a dog is through non-starchy veg. And you might, depending on your dog, you might need something like inulin, for example,
mm.
or you might need extras depending on what they're going through, how they are set up. But it's thinking about those non-starchy veg as your kind of starting point to feed the gut microbiome,
Yeah.
right?
And your blackberries and your blueberries, all with the polyphenols and all the antioxidants, all those good things that we know will support the biome and the body influence all of the things. So if they're going into the diet, it's only a good thing, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And because we had mentioned when we started that again from that Dr. Mark Hyman post yesterday, how we actually produce GLP-1 when we are moving. And so, again, encouraging that with our dogs. And if your dog is obese or it does have a health condition that prohibits moving, even just a little bit, right? You can start off small and having them go sniff and or like a puzzle feeder or play or any of that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be going for a massive hike, but
Mm.
just getting them moving is so good for their entire health, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like they need to be out moving. And again, we've restricted that. We've
Yeah.
massively limited their ability to do that. So that would be another starting point before. So
Yeah.
this is almost like these are the things to try before. If those aren't working, then maybe talk to your vet about some other support for it. But this would be the starting point for it all.
Yeah. Yeah, that and yeah, I was just looking at some of the notes. Yeah, about the way that we're living and that they've got limited time off lead and those types of things that they're not getting that experience of just being able to go and run and sniff and dig in the dirt, which is great for their microbiome. Again, we're all about supporting the microbiome, even being out in the fresh air. We already know that that has a really positive impact on the microbiome too. So
100%.
when they're not having those experiences, that will have a detrimental effect on all of their body, right? So we have to kind of understand that there are breed specific needs as well as just basic dog needs. There's both that they need to be outside, even the little ones. Like Lucky loves going out for a sniff, right? That's part of who he is. And Ted digging in mud and swimming in dirty water is his favorite thing in the whole world, right? So
Exactly.
it's every dog's different, but finding their outlet for them to be able to have those experiences
Yeah.
will help on that weight loss journey.
Exactly. And also, this is both sort of like targeted and with curiosity. But if
Mm.
you have tried different things like changing out the food and adding in, say, probiotics or fermented veg or something like that to help support the gut microbiome, and you're still having an issue, that might be the time to start talking to your vet as well about like different lab work to have done. Like maybe you want to have the thyroid checked, for example,
Yeah.
because then that's going to require a different kind of process, a different kind of protocol. So again, we preach it all the time, but this is the value of tracking things.
Yeah.
Where have you started? What have you tried? What changes are you noticing, etc. And then that's just such valuable information to be able to bring to your vet. But again, it's all of this before just running and trying to get a drug as the solution. Because again, we don't know what the side effects and the long-term impacts of these drugs are actually going to be. And will those side effects actually mask an underlying issue?
And I think we,
Right?
we were speaking earlier, weren't we? And I said as well that I know obviously the side effects that are coming out with humans could be from dogs. They're slightly blurry. They can't necessarily say that their tummy's feeling a little bit uncomfortable unless we're learning to look at them and watch them and observe them and track, which we could, that's part of the picture beforehand, right? Before we try these things that could potentially be detrimental because there are no long-term studies and we have to keep that at the forefront of our mind.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
many things.
Yeah. Well, and at the base of it, this is about get the diet right. Add in foods that are going to support the gut microbiome, or perhaps maybe you do need an actual probiotic supplement. That's another option as well. Track, make sure you're getting them to move. Make sure you're cautious of how many treats you're actually using and the types of treats that you're
Hmm.
using. And yeah, getting them into a kind of regulated state physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yeah,
And
all of that.
question. I mean, at the core of it, this is something we talk about a lot, is really holding up a mirror with love, but holding up a mirror to ourselves and asking like, how much of this am I doing for me? Or cultural expectation. I mean, the pup cups for me are a big one with that because I think we've really normalized. That's just such a great example of what we love to do as humans, and we want to include our dogs. And I get that, and I love it.
Yeah.
And again, every now and again, that's fine. But putting that in the context of, okay, they've had a pup cup today, and they've had all these treats, and they haven't had the opportunity to walk, and they're being fed processed food. That's where you start to see things coming together, or they're getting the pup cup a couple times a week. right? That kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So it's again everything in balance. But what would be a version of that way of sharing that kind of experience and giving that love that would be species specific to them,
Yeah.
right?
Could it be a little cup of bone broth instead? Something like that, rather that then has got functional hydration in amino acids, all the things that are potentially in one of those new products because it's all about the amino acids. Well, if we're feeding real food, we're going to get those anyway. So if we could rethink some of those things, and it could just be a little cup of bone broth, that'd be lovely, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Or, I'll often make like little treat kind of things and I'll take them out with me on a walk with Lucky where we go for like a little picnic and I've got like my little snack and he's got his little snack, but his little snack is like dehydrated heart, or those kinds of things that we can
Yeah,
share in that moment, but he's getting something that is appropriate for him.
for him. Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's kind of switching that lens a little bit.
yeah. And making it more about them and not our need for them to do something human.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hmm. Oh
Exactly.
yeah, and medications was another was because obviously steroids and some of those other meds can then have an impact. So again, it's including all of that and tracking, right? That just comes back to the tracking that when you put, I mean, I saw with steroids, particularly with Shadow, that he did put weight on when he was
Mhm.
on them because he was on them for about 6 months, I think. So that was a struggle for me in that time, was trying to figure out how to feed him well, but without adding on weight because we had joint issues with him as well. So
Right.
there was a lot of factors, but it's the tracking and just being aware of those things. So again, you can talk to your vet about that as well. And look, if you're looking at the body shape and the weight together, that will help when they're on meds like that could potentially be adding to the weight because you're getting a much better picture of how they're carrying it rather than just looking at the numbers on the scale. I know I keep banging on about it, but it's
It's
one of the
huge.
big it's for me it's one of the big things because I've spoken to people like he's bang on this weight and it's brilliant and I'm like, yeah, but they're still, to me, they still look big. And when you put them up against the body chart, they're still a 6, and we want them down,
Right.
particularly on some of the stockier dogs like the Frenchies and some of those other like the bull breeds and stuff. That yes, they fit that criteria on the weight chart, but shape-wise, they're not there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also to your point of medications and steroids and all of that, they also disrupt the gut microbiome. And we know through studies that when there's a correlation between obesity and dysbiosis. So if you can then, if you need to give those medications, obviously you're giving those medications, but what can you do to also support the gut microbiome while you're doing that? So that's your things like bone broth, maybe some fermented veg, that kind of a thing,
Yeah,
so that you're helping to kind of balance it out a little bit. And
yeah.
in those cases, you might actually need a probiotic support. So again, those are conversations to be having with your vet or your nutrition consultant, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
Anything
that's
else?
no,
Oh, sorry.
I think yeah, it's just that the gut dysbiosis and the obesity thing, I think, is being shown so much more in the human space now, and people like Carol at Pet Biome are starting to pick up on those things translating to the dogs as well. So it's something to be really aware of, and you could do a microbiome test to see if there is what actual dysbiosis your dog's got. So you could see how best to target that rather than just using a blanket
Hmm.
probiotic. You could actually target the species of bacteria that you need to rebalance or support so that you've got a better diversity within the gut. So there are other things that you can do again in that kind of testing, whether it's a health condition, is it hypothyroidism or something that's causing the weight gain, or is there a gut imbalance? Could we test that before we go to the kind of silver bullet approach? Let's do some other things first and trial a few options before we go to that. There are things that you can do. So it's just keeping that at the forefront of your mind, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And all of this is about actually how do we get to the root cause versus just symptom treating. Because
Absolutely.
when we can
Yeah.
get to the root cause, we can actually heal it from there. So
Yeah.
we hope that
Yeah.
this is helpful. If you are struggling with obesity with your dog, let us know what are your biggest struggles. And if you do have a dog like a Labrador that's an absolute like counter surfer, what have you done and what have you found helpful for managing all of that? So we would love to know, love to know. Leave us a note. You can get in touch on Instagram at learn.fetch. And yeah, give us an
Yeah.
update on that. But we also wanted to point you to a few things that might be helpful. And one is our Fetch starter pack, which has loads of resources in it to help you get on your fresh food fetch journey. So we've got, if speaking of bone broth, we've got a bone
Yes.
broth recipe in there. So if you want to learn how our kind of like number one go-to recipe for making bone broth. You can, just as a note on bone broth really quickly, you can absolutely buy commercial bone broth, but make sure that you're buying a dog-specific bone broth and not a human one, because a lot of the human ones, they still have salt in them and they're made with onions and bay
Yeah.
leaves and other things that are toxic to dogs. So always make sure you're buying a dog-specific commercial bone broth, or you could bake your own using our recipe. We give you some guidance on energetics as well as looking at targeted approaches for supplements
Yeah.
and all that. There's some really good things in there that could be really helpful for you on your journey. And you could get that. I'll leave the link in the show notes, but you can get that at our website, learnfetch.com, and you'll see the tab for starter pack. Also, we have our Fetch First Light Facebook group, which is a free community for you to come and join and ask your questions, share what's working for you with your dog in terms of obesity. Or if you are struggling with something like obesity, come and ask some questions in there and we can help guide you through it using the Fetch lens. So I will also leave the link in the show notes for that. But basically, it's Fetch First Light under Facebook groups.
Yeah. Wow. So many
And
options, right?
yeah. And if there are any other topics in particular that you want us to cover on our first Fetch First Friday series, let us know. Again, you can get in touch on Instagram at learn.fetch. You can also reach out to me at Mystic Dog Mama and let us know. Or if you're in the group, leave us a note in the group as well and let us know, what are you struggling with most? What would you like us to talk about? What do you need a little bit support on? Or what are you just sort of curious about? And we can make a list of topics to cover in future episodes.
Yeah, we love a rabbit hole to talk about.
Yes, we do. We do. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's episode, and we will see you next month.
See you later. Have a good month.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining Stacy and me for our Fetch First Friday episode on canine obesity. We hope that you found this helpful. Like we mentioned, if you want support on your fresh food journey with your dog, start by grabbing your free copy of our Fetch Starter Pack, and then come join us in our free Fetch First Light Facebook group. I've left both of these links in the show notes, along with a link to the body condition score guide that we mentioned. And like I also mentioned, we'll be taking Fetch on the road to the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival in Birmingham this November 14th through the 16th. And we can offer listeners 25% off a one-day standard ticket. How amazing is that? If you're interested, use the affiliate link and discount code that is in the show notes. Okay, until next time.